I've met Professor Michalewicz at a conference that he organized, actually, and I was quite impressed by the, let's say, the gravitas of the people who attended it. And it's quite interesting because I think there were two former SGI CEOs at the conference. So it was really a very interesting group of people. It was a supercomputing conference. I looked at Professor Michalewicz's bio, and it is quite impressive. So I'm honored to have him here today to talk about networking and building your professional network. Professor, can you introduce yourself to the group?
Yes, thank you very much, Aleksander. Welcome. I welcome everybody. It's good morning to those in Americas, and good afternoon, good evening to people in Europe. I'm Marek Michalewicz. Until very recently, I used to be a director at the Interdisciplinary Center for Mathematical and Computational Modeling at the University of Warsaw, a rather important and substantial research center, especially in, as the name says, in computational modeling, computing, but also infrastructure provider in supercomputing, high performance computing. Some of the important things that ICM was doing is providing weather modeling for Poland and Central Europe area. The service has been running for almost 28 years, very accurate predictions there. This service is used by close to 200 million visitors a year. But ICM has been involved in modeling COVID in Poland, one of the most accurate and important model which is being used by Ministry of Health. Previously, before that, I was Chief Executive Officer at the A-STAR Computational Resource Center in Singapore. A-STAR is the largest research organization in Singapore, around 5,500, 6,000 researchers there, 14 institutes, and I run computing and HPC for that organization. And one of the most important things I've managed to help Singapore with was creation of a National Supercomputer Center, which is operational since 2015, and very vigorous, very interesting developments. Before that, I ran my own startup. I was interested in building sensors and sensor networks based on quantum tunneling, which incidentally was PhD research in theoretical physics, quantum tunneling, especially in scanning tunneling microscope and the like systems. So I had this company for almost 11 years with lots of patents, but unfortunately times were extremely tough for real integrated circuits and real systems. So way more difficult to build anything material than to create software. I can assure everybody of that. And before that, for 10 years almost, I ended up as a principal research scientist at CSIRO, Australia, Commonwealth Scientific and Research Organization, which is the largest research organization in Australia. About at the time, they employed of the order of 7,000 scientists, and I was in a very small group of 4 to 6 people in supercomputing support or high performance computing and communication. That's how it was called. So my entire professional career was in computational science, computing, scientific computing, research, physics, but also because of computing and supercomputing. You of course get exposed and acquainted with almost any science that requires computation. So that's perhaps the most interesting part of it, that there are no strict barriers and silos. You get exposed to lots of wonderful ideas and lots of extremely interesting personalities. And besides, so I've lived in 4 continents over 35 years, in Australia, United States for 2 years, in Singapore for 12 years, and for the last 5 years in Poland. So I'm kind of new in Poland. I'm still going through a culture shock.
Right. Well, scientific computing kind of bridges the gap between science and engineering. So I wanted to ask you specifically about networking, because this audience is primarily engineers and to some extent scientists, people interested in contributing to the academia as well. And so in both of these areas, engineering and science, can you really be a leader? Can you really be successful without a network of connections?
I think I can hardly think of anybody who is in a leadership position without a network. So I believe the network is one of the prerequisites of becoming a leader. And if you think about people in, let's say, in politics, it's very prominent and visible, especially in Poland, everywhere. People in politics cannot even dream of being noticed without a very strong network. And then, but networks are everywhere, and of course, one needs to understand that network is very positive. You know, it can of course mean lots of things, but in the context of professional scientific network, it's a very important thing. It's you build it over your entire career. It requires enormous effort on the part of person building it, but of course it can happen very early. You know, if someone attends some sort of elite school, which is known for educating lots of very talented young people, you know, feeding a good university, attending good university course, top university. Of course, you've naturally get acquainted with lots of people who in time become prominent and important, and in a completely natural way, you acquire this network. That's one way, of course, but then there are lots of ways of building it and enhancing and working on this.
All right. So what is really the purpose of the network? How do you leverage that as an engineer or a scientist?
Well, first of all, science is a community effort. Even there's nobody with good idea which comes from vacuum. If you think of any discovery in science, it is in a context of current debate, of current open problems. So in order to be exposed to the most important current ideas, challenging ideas without solutions yet, goes applies to scientific questions and technology questions equally. You have to be part of some sort of ongoing discussion, debate. And the network is one of the means of being in this discussion. So even if you study history of science, people like Leibniz and Newton, at that time they corresponded. There was a very, very intense correspondence between the scientists. Then, of course, nowadays we also correspond in a different way, by emails, by conferences, by video conferences, by meetings. So that's one important thing that comes from networking, that you get exposed to the freshest ideas, to the most relevant questions.
All right, that's definitely a very important reason. I just want to mention, because I just got a request from one of the participants that live transcription be enabled for the meeting. I have to say I haven't used that feature in Zoom yet, although I did enable it for my account. Let me give it a try if you're okay with that, Professor, yes, as well, and see what happens. Yeah, sure. I don't know how accurate it's going to be. Let's give it a try. Right, so now my question is, How about making sure, or how ensuring that influential individuals chase you rather than you chasing them? Because influential individuals, people who have prominence, they tend to be surrounded by people who want their attention.
Yes.
So how do you build a network with those people who are in that position, who have let's say that they are like a magnet to different people who want their time? How do you make sure that either they chase them or you somehow build that connection with them?
Well, there are different ways, of course. First of all, sometimes it's indeed very, very difficult to reach out to some extremely prominent people. And I tried and I failed. I can give an example of Ray Kurzweil. I wished to invite him. I thought he might be a very, very provoking, very interesting speaker for my conference. I could never manage because he has got an agent, and the agent quoted a price which was way beyond any. And besides, we are organizing scientific conference where all the speakers spoke free of charge, except of course the cost of their trip. But they never sort of benefited. They never had compensation for speaking. So there are those cases. Simple thing is to have lots of friends. Friends can help you reaching other people, and if you have prominent friends, it's sort of like some sort of avalanche effect, and you can always ask. First of all, the most important thing is to keep asking people. If you ask kindly and politely, most people would like to oblige and help you. So of course, if you held back and are sort of constrained in your shyness, then chances are slim. But then there are other things. Of course, it's very helpful to be recognized somewhere, for something. Okay, so of course you have to build your professional stature, to be recognized for something, or to at least be sort of part of a cloud. I can of this sort of certain crowd, and my professional sort of group are people connected with supercomputing. Of course, it's a very large community, but there are some participants in this that are sort of outstanding and the most important. And there's a group of maybe a few hundred of them, and it's best to know them. And one of the ways I was employing is basically, it's cold call. Sometimes I just write to someone and ask him questions or invite him for something, and quite often people, of course, I meet rejections, and it happened many times, but very often people respond in a very nice way. Sometimes they just excuse themselves, they're very busy, sought after, but usually it works. Of course, it helps if you have, I was writing first as a director of ICM. It helps a lot, it's at least, puts you somewhere, people can associate you with institutions, and having this institution behind you, certain good university, recognized preferably, that helps a lot. But another thing and that's not deliberately to form network, but just because of my nature. If I'm at the conference, attending a lecture, there are always some interesting aspects of the talk that requires extra questions. I always ask questions, always, almost, and they are not to sort of for show. They are genuine expression of my interest in the topic. Sometimes I ask during the lecture, sometimes I approach lecturers after the talk. And I just start a discussion about the topic that is the life sort of interest of the speaker. Of course, if suddenly you show interest in something that other people do, those people will start appreciating your curiosity and your sort of effort to ask questions. You know, they won't be offended by the fact that you ask questions. So that's one of the things that and helped me in many different ways. So being open and being sort of receptive to ideas and engaging in discussion that is sort of vital to the person who speaks. That's one way of getting to know more people. And they will later remember you, of course.
Right, asking questions. Yeah, I have to say I also found myself that this really helps build the initial connection. I want to ask you a bit about more advice on this subject. So you mentioned that you're organizing a conference, and I suppose that has been helpful in building the network. Gives, I suppose, a reason to connect to someone, to approach someone. Can you give us some other ideas, strategies on how to expand the network?
Look, in the case of conference, of course, it's good to be sort of to some degree recognized by at least few people somewhere in the society of professional society, and then of course in the case of conference, you need to first step is to create a scientific program committee, and so usually these are your acquaintances, people who will be recognized in your field and whom you know. And sometimes, of course, you invite people whom you don't know, but there has to be something in the conference or in the event that you organize that is attractive and valuable and of quality to those people, because very busy people who are very sort of prominent in their field, they of course are quite selective. And but then there are sort of steps, and through this scientific program committee, you may reach out to many people whom you don't know. It's a like graph. It's a second degree, third degree acquaintanceship. So of course, you know, if you get to know people who are known to your people from your network, and that's how it works. That's yet another example.
All right, great. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to open the stage for the audience to ask questions. I'm going to change the view to gallery view as well, so that we can see each other. By the way, if you could turn your camera on, that would be great. It's good to see your faces. We are all speakers. We feed on the energy of the audience, so it would be greatly appreciated if you could turn your camera on. And if you have any questions, you can either put them in the chat, or just raise your hand, or just you can unmute yourself and ask a question directly. I'd like to ask you, Professor, about time allocation. So how much time do you allocate between actual research, engineering, and soft work, so to say, such as speaking, writing, networking, management?
Well, that in the recent years, I must regret. I regret to say that most of my time was on the management, especially at the ICM. I had very little time for my own research, and the research that I've done was mainly with my students, master students. And now the situation changed, and I managed to already complete one paper and a book chapter, and I'm working on another one. So it's much better. I have my hands are free, and but the organizing conference, and I've been over the years. For 7 years in a row, I've organized supercomputing frontiers. That takes enormous amount of time. Especially that was, how would I say, boutique conference organized by me and a couple of co-workers, so very restricted group of people. Of course, even if you have humongous, the largest conference like supercomputing in the United States, which is attended by 30,000 people, the chair of the conference devotes to this effort 1 full year. almost full time. So it's taken from your life. So it's a very substantial investment in time. But if you few slides where which I show to my students and show what are the ingredients to build the. I'll go quickly, and of course I can share it with the audience later, so I won't take much. Is it okay?
Yeah, let's do that. You should be able to share the screen, and if you can't, then let me know, and I'll give you the rights.
I can't. So I need your rights.
Right.
Give me your rights.
Give me 1 second, please. I'll need to make a co-host. There you go. Yep. Right. Please try now.
So here a few slides, and here are many different ways of expanding your career and recognition of who you are in your professional fields. First of all, the basic ingredients is your education and degrees, wherever you obtain them, because you have to know something. Second thing, of course, all of us are working somewhere, and gaining professional experience is an important thing. The very important thing is continuous discussion and giving and taking, of course, and that's mentoring, for example. But you can be a mentor, you can be a mentee in the process. Both things are extremely important. I'm involved in mentoring right now, and that's extremely satisfying engagement. Of course, there are professional associations. I will talk more. Conferences, professional publication literature. Of course, you have to also show what is your creation through articles, books, or maybe blogs, maybe discussions, in professional discussion boards and the like. And of course, for younger people, engagement as in student competition, hackathons, and voluntary work. I recommend this reading of watching the lecture by Richard Hamming about you and your research. I want to get there. Extremely valuable. I always ask all my students to go through. In terms of professional association, for me, it's ACM, Association for Computing Machinery. Extremely high quality, one of the best organizations I belong to. There's, of course, IEEE. Here's the link. Lots of different societies where each of you in computing and professional field can find interesting things. And of course, membership allows you to have electronic libraries, to publications, to conferences. In my case of supercomputing, high performance computing, there are two conferences that are sort of like a jamboree for me. I go there since 2009, every year except of COVID years. Maybe last 2 years I haven't been there, but I sort of watch virtually. One is in the United States this year in Dallas, and another one is in Hamburg, the largest European conference. And this Supercomputing Frontiers is the conference that I've been organizing for the last 7 years. Here's the supercomputing webpage. That's ISC. ISC also provides opportunities for student volunteers. The program is closed right now already, but I encourage all my students and other students, any student, to be there. They're extremely valuable program items. There are special meetings with the most important personalities in our field. Students have a chance to ask them questions and exactly ask questions about career. Of course, there are publications like HPC Inside HPC, Top 500, Kurzweil, very interesting things, the register and so forth. There are publications on market intelligence. And here I have a few of them, like Next Platform or Hyperion Research and so forth. And basically that's it. I can stop sharing, but there are so many different ways of connecting. and working on that. And one thing about conferences I think are extremely important, because in the research there are sometimes you work on the big problem, read Richard Hammond, and you don't have any breakthroughs, you're sort of stuck. And by going to conferences, I found that there are so many interesting people with so many fascinating ideas. You can come back from the conference with a dozen of new ideas in technology, in research, and it's extremely sort of a fertile ground. It just gives you so much. But of course, I've also noticed that there are some people, I might say that unfortunately that happens with some of my colleagues from our country, that little sort of click. Okay, they don't open up. You go to conference to talk to people, to meet people, and you make all effort to be exposed and to sort of use the conference for professional reasons. It's not sightseeing. It's not visiting nice cities. It's just you have to spend week, 2 weeks before the conference, look at the program, think carefully what you really want to learn there, see there, who are the good people to talk to, and so forth. So that's a very hard work.
Yeah, I think this is something we've all noticed when people go to a conference and they just stay within their own group of friends rather than meeting others. That's not the point, isn't it? Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. Waste of time.
Yeah, so these were great ideas, and the student volunteering that you mentioned now, and I wish I had done this when I was a student, because that sounds like such a great way of building that network, especially with people who may become prominent in the future, and with everybody who currently is. I'd like to ask you a little bit about this. Current trend, so to say, of virtual conferences. With the pandemic, of course, we all had to skip some of the events we would otherwise attend. What tips would you give on networking at virtual events? Is it even possible? Some of these events are very, so to say, like a broadcast. Right. And there's little opportunity to meet others. Do you have any advice on how to meet, how to network virtually?
The dynamics is quite different. The last 2 conferences that I organized, Supercomputing Frontiers Europe, were virtual events. On one hand, it was a great success because we could reach new audiences, and I immediately jumped on the opportunity, and we organized 2 separate streams, a focus on Africa, focus on India. So we could invite people, speakers from those regions, from Africa and from India, and they are very interesting topics, current one. But usually speakers have rather big difficulties, coming to conferences. There are problems with visas, it costs a lot of money. So sadly, we opened up in that way. Of course, virtual conferences are more difficult for participants in the sense of even for networking, because they are becoming sort of a part of the background. So I would suggest that people who want to follow up, again, the same principle. You stick with the topic that interests you, fascinates you, opens up new questions. Follow up with offline or sort of off conference, after conference. Everybody, I think it's the human nature. Everybody is pleased when people ask him or her about their achievements and work and the concept. So of course, if someone asks, especially young people or students ask, probing questions, I believe most of the speakers will respond, and that's how the dialogue can sort of ensure. But of course, it's a process. It's not just let's sort of touch and go. But if you're of course genuinely interested, it can evolve, and it can evolve into long-term relationship, sort of this sort of ongoing discussion on the topics. Sometimes it's very simple, you know, sometimes you just need some advice on some technology solutions, things like that, but that's also valuable. Everything that's, so basically it's being open and asking questions and engaging in discussions both ways.
I like this idea, and contacting the speakers and asking them follow-up questions. I can definitely imagine this can work. And you mentioned how at the time of Newton, they corresponded on paper. So why not network by email? Certainly. We have a question from Chris, who's raising his hand. Chris, please unmute yourself and the floor is yours.
Yeah, hi. I just had a quick question with what I've been struggling with kind of building the professional network, which is identifying the right conference to go to for the topic I'm looking for. I was curious what kind of strategies or what resources are there that you've utilized to kind of find that right little niche for something that you're interested in.
Well, that's a very good question, because now if you see proliferation of conference, and even for me as the organizer of the conference, I have to be very careful because there's a huge competition. So conference is also treated by many organizations as business model, okay? So for earning, sort of a way of earning money. For me, it's quite easy because I know that there are sort of like 3 very important conferences, and there are some less important, so maybe not less important, but the 2 that I have shown are very general. So it means they cover a lot of ground: equipment, infrastructure, technology, science, research, national labs, vendors, the main sort of creators of technology. Everything is there. So it's a kind of must for me in my case. But if you, for example, think about, you know, artificial intelligence or image processing and artificial intelligence in biology, okay, usually there are some conference organized, very often organized by professional bodies. And I would look at first of all at the professional associations which are engaged and underwrite or support or sponsor those conferences, because that is one mark of quality as well. You know, if you have an ACM conference or IEEE conference, they usually sort of pretty established and good. Then I would look for, if I know the names of sort of prominent players in this field. You know, and list of speakers. I always look at a list of speakers and list of topics. So through association, through your contacts, through topics, and of course even, you know, you can have this sort of scattergun approach of looking through Google. But then if you start looking at professional publications specific to your field, you will see that certain events are sort of advertised, or you can have some indications of what is happening. And in almost every field, in let's say in the semiconductor industry, in optical metrology, and you can mention in MEMS. Whatever topic you choose, there will be some sort of leading conference, the most important conference. I would start with that. Then there are more specific, dealing with sort of more sort of subfields, and that's how I would choose. It's kind of you need to get used to it. And also ask your friends, you know, what ask people if sort of start if you can. Does it answer your question, Chris?
Yes, it does. Thank you so much.